Hey everyone, I welcome you all to my channel. An adventurous story awaits us. So grab some snacks, get comfy, and let your imagination take flight. First story, Uninvited Guest. The night was dark and stormy as Jake sat alone in his bedroom watching horror movies. His parents were away on vacation, and his brother was spending the night at a friend's house, so Jake had the entire house to himself. Jake was really getting into this super creepy movie about a haunted asylum when he decided to pause it and go grab a midnight snack from the kitchen. As he was rummaging through the pantry, looking for something to munch on, a loud creaking noise from downstairs made him freeze. "That's weird," Jake whispered to himself. He waited silently for a moment, thinking it was just the old house settling. But soon after, he heard the distinct sound of the back door closing. Jake felt his heart start racing, because he knew for sure no one was supposed to be home right now. The walls were so thin in the old split-level house that sounds echoed easily from floor to floor. Jake stood motionless, straining to listen. Then he picked up the distinct sound of slow, heavy footsteps walking around on the first floor. Jake scrambled to grab his phone and text his brother and parents, asking if anyone had just come home. They all replied right away, saying nope, it was just Jake in the house. He started to tremble, realizing there must be an intruder inside. Jake called his brother in a harsh whisper, "Dude, there's someone in the house right now." But his brother had no idea what he was talking about. The mysterious footsteps were now creaking up the stairs, headed straight for Jake's bedroom at the far end of the hall. Jake's heart pounded violently as he stared wide-eyed at his slowly turning doorknob. The hinges squealed as the door crept open. Jake froze and squeezed his eyes shut, pretending to be asleep. From the tiny slit in his eyelids, he could make out the dark silhouette of a man peering around his room. Jake laid as still as a statue, not daring to move a muscle. After what felt like an eternity, the intruder closed the door and his footsteps retreated back down the hall. Jake seized his cell phone and dialed 911 with shaky hands. He explained the situation to the dispatcher in hushed tones. Within minutes, red and blue police lights were flashing outside the house. The police searched every nook and cranny, but found no sign of the intruder. Jake thanked the officers as they left, hoping this nightmare of a night was over. Exhausted, he collapsed into bed, leaving the hallway lights on just in case. But Jake's terror returned when the motion sensor light in the backyard suddenly clicked on. Jake cautiously peered out his window, and his blood ran cold. The shadowy figure of a man was lurking across the lawn, heading for the trees that lined the property. Jake realized with dread that this was likely the same creep who had been inside his house. He must have been trying to get back in, only to find the doors now locked. Jake barely slept a wink that night, listening intently for any sounds out of the ordinary. He had never felt so vulnerable in his own home. Come morning, Jake was immensely relieved to see his family's car pulling into the driveway. He recounted the terrifying home invasion to his wide-eyed parents and brother. After that night, Jake became extra diligent about locking up, as one small oversight had almost ended very badly. So if you're ever home alone and hear a suspicious noise, don't ignore it. Better safe than sorry when it comes to protecting your home. Jake learned the hard way that creepy things can happen, even in your own bedroom. Check your locks and keep your phone handy, or you might just find yourself starring in your very own horror movie. Second story room, 313. It was the most bone-chilling, terrifying night of her life, and it still made her blood run cold thinking back on it. She was 28 years old, and her boyfriend Todd lived in another state several hours away. They took turns making the long drive to visit each other, but she more often made the trek to see Todd since he had his own apartment while she was still living with her sister as a roommate. She was heading up to stay with him for over a week, because she had time off from her job as a school teacher for winter break. She packed up her junky old 2009 Hyundai that she had bought off her sister and hit the road for the long haul up to Todd's place. The farther north she drove, the more cautious she had to be as the snow increased significantly and her car was hardly reliable in icy winter conditions. It was getting late into the evening, and the snow was really starting to come down hard, drastically reducing visibility. There had been blizzard warnings issued earlier that day, but she and Todd had discussed it and figured she should still try to press on to beat the brunt of the storm rather than waiting it out. But now, she realized she would likely have to stop somewhere overnight since the roads were deteriorating quickly and she was still several hours away. Feeling exhausted from the long day of driving, she decided to stop at a small, dimly lit diner along the highway to get a quick bite to eat and weigh her options. The middle-aged waitress kindly told her there was likely no way she should keep driving in these worsening conditions and suggested a few motels in the area that she could check into for the night. After the waitress walked away to put in her food order, a gruff-looking man sitting alone at the end of the diner's bar, drinking a beer, turned around and gruffly mentioned there was an ultra-cheap motel just up the road that she could stay at. In hindsight, she really should not have trusted the advice of this random, rough-looking stranger, but she was feeling desperate to find a place to hole up before the storm got any worse. After hastily eating her meal, she left the diner and could barely see 10 feet in front of her car at this point. Squinting through the heavy snow filling her headlights, she managed to find the rundown, sketchy motel the man at the bar had suggested. She got a room key from the bored, disinterested clerk working the front desk and hurried to her dingy little room to get settled in for the night. She tried to FaceTime Todd to let him know she had stopped for the night, but frustratingly couldn't get any signal at all. They resorted to sporadically texting each other instead whenever she could get a brief signal. As she was texting Todd about the deteriorating weather, she suddenly heard an odd noise coming from the closed bathroom. She could have sworn that door was wide open when she first came in. Texting Todd about the strange occurrence, she started to freak out, realizing she had run to the front desk earlier in a rush without locking her room door behind her. Todd asked if the room door locked automatically when closed or not. She wasn't sure, now feeling uncertain about whether she had left it cracked open slightly or fully shut. He told her to go check the door and make sure to bring the room key with her this time. Looking closely at the door now, she saw it had a manual locking mechanism that had to be turned each time and didn't lock on its own. But looking down, she then noticed a second set of large footprints in the snow outside, leading right up to her room. Filled with terror, she ran back to the front desk and frantically told the clerk someone was definitely in her room or had been while she was out. The bored clerk barely reacted and didn't call the police, but simply made a brief phone call speaking in a foreign language she couldn't understand. He begrudgingly gave her a new room key for a different room, but she felt no less uneasy. First thing in the morning, she left the sketchy motel in a hurry despite the still bad weather, feeling immense relief to put that disturbing place in her rearview mirror. She made sure to call the diner later that day to try to warn them about the creepy man at the bar who had sent her to that motel. She had learned her lesson the hard way about ever trusting random strangers when traveling alone. It was easily the most chilling, unsettling night she had ever experienced. Third story, don't talk to strangers. It was a quiet night last year when I found myself home alone in my small house in a peaceful neighborhood. At around 10 p.m., I heard a knock on my front door, which struck me as odd given the late hour. I went to the window and saw a petite woman who looked to be in her mid to late 20s standing there. I had never seen this woman before in my life. After thinking for a few seconds, curiosity got the best of me, and I decided to open the door. The woman greeted me and explained her car had broken down on my street. She claimed she was just down the road and had already knocked on 2 of my other neighbors' doors with no luck. I asked if she had called for roadside assistance, and she said there was no cell signal in the area. I looked down the street where she had pointed but didn't see a vehicle at first. When I asked where exactly her car was located, she urged me to follow her and asked if I knew anything about car repairs. As it turned out, I did have some mechanical skills from working on my own cars over the years. My interest was piqued enough to go with her to take a look. As we walked, she explained her car had suddenly lost power and died. I followed her down my driveway and onto the dark, deserted road. Just past my next-door neighbor's house, as the road curved into an isolated area surrounded by woods, I spotted what appeared to be a fairly new Honda CR-V parked along the shoulder. When we got within about 15 feet of the car, I noticed the windows were extremely tinted. The woman walked up to the driver's door, unlocked it, and that's when I saw both rear doors swing open. 2 men stepped out, one on either side, now standing just 10 feet from me. The instant I saw them, I spun around and sprinted as fast as I could in the opposite direction. I heard the men start chasing me, but I didn't look back. By some miracle, I managed to get back inside my house and locked the door just as they reached it. I immediately called the police, but the attackers fled within a minute, vanishing into the night by the time cops arrived. I gave the police descriptions, but they were vague at best. I never got the license plate number or a clear look at the faces of my attackers. To this day, I don't know if those people were ever found. At the end of the day, though, I'm just grateful I escaped unharmed. I came within mere seconds of some unknown, sinister fate. I certainly learned my lesson about trusting strangers after that night.